Warning, I was drunk while making this video. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hold on to your seats and guard your fruit cups. This guy's a bona fide taint-kicking badass. It's Roy Benavidez on today's Motivated Moments in History. Roy Benavidez was born in DeWitt County, Texas in 1935. He was the son of a Mexican-American father and his mother was a Yaqui Indian. He was orphaned at 5 years old and was then raised by his extended family in El Campo, Texas. He dropped out of school when he was 15 and dug ditches for a living. He got tired of the work and soon joined the Texas National Guard in 1952. In 1955, he got tired of not deploying and decided to go to the 82nd Airborne, where he could assume the full-time job of slaying some motherfucking bodies. After airborne school, he trained to become a member of the super-duper elite as fuck 5th Special Forces Group. In 1965, he got his chance to go whack some commies and deliver some 5.56 democracy in Vietnam, and then went and landed in country, loaded his weapon, and headed out to make some fucking green grass grow. But then he stepped on a landmine and was paralyzed from his waist down. At Fort Sam Houston, the doctors told him the unfortunate news that he'll never be able to walk again. Well, he called them on their bullshit, and every night in the hospital, he'd crawl out of bed to the wall, hoist himself up to a standing position, and practice moving his limbs. 7 months after being told he'd be confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life, he walked himself out of the hospital and rode his ass back to Fort Bragg. It was 1968, he was back in Vietnam, back behind enemy lines. It was just him and a buddy on a recon mission. They were spotted by the enemy, and his friend was shot multiple times, to include taking a round to the freaking eyeball. Roy called for a medevac, and a helicopter showed up and tossed out 2 ropes. Roy secured his friend to one and himself to the other. As they were lifted out the jungle canopy, the ropes became entangled and started to burn. Well, one of the crew members of the helicopter, Leroy Wright, who is also a longtime friend of Roy's, noticed the ropes were burning and twisted, so he applied a strap to his waist and lowered himself down and untangled the ropes all by himself. Roy noticed this remarkable feat as an act of love, and he considered himself to be indebted to his friend. It was May that year. Roy was at a forward operating base in Loch Ninh. Roy heard over the radio that Leroy and some dudes were stranded in the jungle and they were pinned down and needed to get out. 3 helicopters were already sent to extract them, but they were unable to land due to the fierceness of the enemy fire. Well, Roy, he raced to a 4th helicopter and flew out and soon directed it to land in a nearby clearing close to the action. Now, usually when you're getting out of a helicopter to go fight, especially with a formidable enemy force, you'd have something like guns and ammos and a lot of shit to kill these bastards. Roy, he had a knife. He ran up and... Wait, stop. He had a knife? What? Let me check my script. Hold on. Let me check. Yeah, it was just a knife. That is some cool shit. He had a knife. Just a knife. It says it right here. A freaking knife. Who does that? Who charges out a helicopter into some thick jungle with a bunch of badass enemy dudes and all you have is an 8 bag and a knife? No Rambo type shit weapons, a freaking knife. Who does that shit? That is the most badass shit I've ever heard of in my entire life. You want to know who does that? Roy Benavidez, that's who. He raced to the wounded man and received multiple gunshots in the leg, face, and head. But that didn't stop him. He kept going. Then he was stabbed by an NVA guy with a bayonet, pulled the bayonet out of his body, and then used that knife to stab the NVA guy to death. Scratch the knife shit. This is the most badass thing I've ever heard in my life. Not charging out of a helicopter with a knife, it's pulling a bayonet out and then stabbing a guy with a knife. That's so fucking badass. So he dragged some of the wounded soldiers to the helicopter and grabbed one of the guy's weapons and started peeling some freaking caps back. And as the enemy's fire became more and more overwhelming, he rushed back out into the crossfire to retrieve a deceased comrade as well as some classified documents. When he got to the fallen soldier, he was shot in the abdomen and hit with a freaking grenade. And at the same time he was doing this, the helicopter he helped load was shot down and crashed back down into the fight. So he ran back to the chopper despite being wounded literally from head to freaking toe and started evacuating the wounded from the wreckage. On the second trip to rescue personnel from the overturned helicopter, he was clubbed from behind by another NVA guy in his rifle. Well, he turned around and fought that dude hand to hand and killed that motherfucker like he was in some climactic scene of a Purge movie. By this time, his guts were hanging out, and he finally collapsed after securing every document and wounded member of the team. This dude beat a guy to death while his own guts were hanging out. Who the fuck does that? Never mind about getting out of the helicopter with a knife. Never mind about the whole bayonet thing, pulling it out and stabbing a guy. This is the most badass shit I've ever heard in my life. After 6 hours of pure gut-wrenching chaos, he was rescued and loaded onto the belly of a helicopter. He lost a shitload of blood, so much so, and after sustaining 30 gunshot, stab, grenade, and blunt force wounds, the medics were certain that he was dead. So as they were zipping him up in a body bag, he split a freaking blood loogie into a doctor's face. Now after all this, you'd think that he'd be medically discharged. But no! He went on to make Master Sergeant and retired 8 years later. This guy is a badass! I know some of you guys are trying to get med voted for flat feet and shin splints. This dude was hit by everything, had his guts hanging out, and went on to serve 8 more years. So help me, this guy is the only man to ever live because the rest of us are whiny pussy-ass vaginas. For some dumb reason, this story was never told or believed until 1980, when his friends from service started writing letters and campaigning for him to get what he earned, which was the nation's highest medal. In 1981, after a fierce letter-writing campaign, President Reagan finally awarded Roy Benavidez with the Medal of Honor. In 1983, the Social Security Administration announced that they were going to stop paying disability checks to wounded veterans. Roy, he went to the press and then marched his ass straight to the nation's capital and told those corrupt, dick-munching fucksticks to quit their bullshit and give the vets what they're owed. The committee listened, and they halted their plans to end compensation pay. Roy died in 1988, and he is buried at the Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery. And that, kids, is your Motivated Moments.